Oh yeah, he's a good guy. One day, yes, so get around. Yeah. Otherwise, it's like it comes and goes. Heavy field work time, you know. Yells around the stage doing stuff. Yeah. 5-year project. You know how to do it. You know, yeah, in the gaps. Jason always where it's like, what do you use on?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am wow, it's great to be here with you all. I graduated from here in 2004. I left here in 2003, but you know how leaving graduating sometimes going back late after the same time. Glad to be back here as chair of the Alumni Advisory Board for the Department of Science. It's quite a privilege and honor to be able to serve in this role and to be able to work with the people who helped develop my skills as a scientist, as well as many of you. I'm looking at people, folks you know who well. It's also my privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Kathleen Woida today. Kathy graduated here in 1990, where she had worked with Dr. Lon Drake, as well as some of the other faculty in the department at that time, on Pleistocene paleosols in Madison County, Iowa. We all know Madison County, don't we? It's a fun place to go. She worked for years thereafter as a teaching here in the department, and in 1993 started a 25-year career with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He moved to Utah to be a geologist for the USDA. It's so obscure there, you know. There's so many plants and stuff. Everything. It reminds me of these meetings. That wonderful book that was written. National parks, how terrible they are. There's rocks everywhere. Everywhere you look, a point of it. After Utah, we outfit New Mexico, where she worked also as with the USDA as state geologist, and then to Des Moines, where she finished her career working in that state. After she retired, and she took up a long bird project that she and wrote a book. It was published in 1991 by the University of Iowa Press, and that book is the Iowa's Remarkable Story. I don't think she's I see other contributions that continue to populate her CV. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kathleen Woida as the 2023 Distinguished Alumni Award recipient, and comes with it. There's a oh, it's our honor. Congratulations. Here we did a 48-minute presentation. Following up, so.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that introduction and the award. It's always great to be back in Shelburne Hall. A lot of fun this year. I'm not so fun. Yeah, I came to soils in the opposite direction that soil scientists do. They start from the surface and go down. I chose a buried soil, ancient soil, paleosol, Pleistocene paleosol, deep down in the ground, and I worked my way up. So You know, soils, I'd like to kind of address this mainly, not mainly, but at least to the undergraduates, because I'm kind of promoting soils as a study as part of colleges. They may not be as sexy or collectible as some rocks and the fossils, but they're in the complex beauty, a lot of it is microscopic. I like to think of them as kind of geology in action because they're right there in the present under your feet. And they're forming at a time scale that's a lot faster than rock and fossils form. So they're really an opportunity to observe geology. I think it is working for. So I do think it's essential whether you're talking about the past, because there's a lot of information in paleosols about the past. There's information in present-day soils about the past. And they're certainly important in the present, and it will be very important. And that's kind of why I called it the archives of the past, harbinger of the future. One way or another, there will be a harbinger, hopefully a good harbinger. I think in soil profile, it's certainly a very long-term storage medium. I mean, if you look at the stuff on the left, it's come and gone like in the last 30 years, except for the cuneiform tablet etched 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. Most of Iowa soils are a lot older than that. There's information that's longer than that. So they tell a story. The horizons, the soil horizons, and the morphology of the soils within those horizons that tell that story. And so what I'm going to show you is what is that information we're talking about. Here we've got, I'm not sure if it's official, but we call it the Iowa State soil, not Iowa State University, State Soil of Iowa. Clarify that. The Tama soil, and on the left are the horizons. It's got a lot of horizons. It's a really well-developed soil. It's on a stable, for the most part, older landscape. And then on this one formed under grassland prairie, for the most part. And because it formed under grasses, we know from studies done on the Russian steppes, as well as in the prairies of North America, that if it forms under grasses, it's going to have a thick, dark A horizon of topsoil, at least 9 inches. It has to be 9 inches to qualify as a mollusol or prairie soils or grassland soil. It's going to have within that topsoil granular structure. Now, this is looking at the soil microscope, petrographic microscope, and the width of this is less than a ½ inch. So we're looking at very close, small portion of soil. It's a vertical cross section. And then down here, that's the A horizon, nice thick 1.5 to 2 feet of dark soil. In the B horizon, there's clay accumulation from where clay has moved down through the profile and form these coatings on channels, either root channels or soil fauna. And typically, it's going to have a pH about neutral, right around 7. If we go to a forest soil, because it formed under trees, it's called an alpha soil, a forest or woodland soil. It has a much thinner A horizon, and it's got still again that clay accumulation in the B horizon right here. But in between the A and the B, there's something called an E horizon. E stands for eluvial, meaning material has been removed from that horizon and moved downward. So clay, iron, and aluminum have been removed. So it's eluvial horizon, and it often has this plating. I'm not sure it comes up very well there. Kind of like a little bit curvy plates. That's typical of an A horizon. So, actually, I want to say one more thing about this. So, does this look like grass is growing up here? No, it looks like a dry cornfield. And if the soil has not been significantly eroded, it doesn't matter. It's no longer grass there, but the profile has a memory. It is telling us what was there in the past. So unless that A horizon is eroded off, you have that information. Another thing is the soil texture. Is a clue to past geologic processes. If it's less has these thin sections, under the microscope, it has at least 80% silt, less. And it's about in western Iowa. And glacial till dimension is going to have a lot more clay and sand. And the alluvium or stream deposits typically are going to be laminated or bedded in some fashion, and they can be either real sandy, real silty in Iowa, either one or the other. And so those are that texture of the soil. It actually means that relative percentages of sand, silt, and clay. And that's a clue to osteology. Color and redoxamorphic features, commonly called models, shortened to redox because they're the result of reduction and oxidation, so redox. Tell you about the water table and seasonal fluctuations of the water table. On the left, keep hitting the wrong button. On the left is a soil that is well drained, and the water table is typically down here near the bottom of the profile. And it does have some models, but you don't run into models till you're pretty far down into the profile because the water table is consistently low. On the right-hand side, it's quite the opposite. These are 10YR colors in the Monticello color charts, very typical of a lot of Iowa well-drained soils. These are 5YR, and they tend to be more gray and greenish gray. And so here, that water table sits quite shallow, less than 2 feet, for prolonged periods of time above that what's called VG horizon. So that's why it has these colors. And you do get some orange models, but that only means that water table dropped for a short period of time. Because it doesn't take long for iron to oxidize. So it drops briefly, get the models, and then it rises back up. And then one last thing, there's information in soil profile about where on the landscape it formed. So you've got well drained, poorly drained, where the water table is quite shallow, there's a stream. The thickness of the soil, the thickness of the horizons is going to really depend on where it's located. If you've got soil right along here, there's a lot of erosion going on and the soil is quite thin. So it all depends on the hill slopes. And the drainage also depends, obviously, and because the drainage depends on the slope position, then the colors depend on the slope position. So it's all kind of tied together. And that's about all I'm going to say. The status of calcium carbonate, the base saturation. Most of Iowa deposits, have calcium carbonate dispersed throughout the matrix. But over time, that calcium carbonate gets leached out and moved down. Here on the right, again, that's that schema soil. It's leached all the way down to more than 2 meters down. So there's no, if you took an acid bottle, it wouldn't do. Here, it's not leached at all the way from the surface down, because it's on a much younger landscape. It's on the Des Moines Road. There was also some drought for a long lasting drought about 4,000 years ago that really set that soil formation. Notice this has 2 horizons. This soil has multiple horizons. It's much more developed. So status of that leaching really depends on how long it's been on the landscape, what the annual precipitation has been, and also position on the landscape. Okay. So every soil profile has a lot of information in it. And really, that's not the whole story. As Les Malloy calls it, it's a living mantle. And that's the second half of my talk. Soil is an ecosystem. It's not just a collection of minerals and rocks. It's actually an ecosystem. And that's going to really come into play when we start talking about what agriculture is doing to our soils. Okay, I read a book a little while ago called Timefulness. Maybe you've run across it. It's by Marcia Bjorn, something like that. She got me thinking about geological thinking, taking a long view. And honestly, I think it's one of the greatest privilege of being a geologist or geoscientist is that we do have that long view. We're looking at things that are really, really ancient. Some of you are looking at very and stuff. So I think I, for one, whenever I see a landscape my mind can't help but wonder what's underneath that, what's happening underneath. So I think, when you think about the subsurface as well as the surface, and we're able to think about the past, the present, and maybe even the future. And I'll talk a little more about that in a little bit. Okay. Oh, yeah, I wanted to mention, if you squeeze all of Earth history into one day, modern humans have been around for 8 seconds. So that kind of puts it in perspective of rates of change and how fast things are changing today, compared to geologic rates. So we're going to take the long view and time travel back to the Pleistocene. The Pleistocene, of course, was the last 2.5 million years or so of Earth's history, when there were multiple ice sheets that moved in and out of the Midwest. And before about 50 years ago or so, I guess, stuff, right? The geologists thought that there were about 4 different advances, 4 major glaciations in Iowa, at least. Turns out research done between like 1978, 2004, pretty much established that there were at least 10 glacial advances. And if you talk to Phil Kerr, that number's growing. But where was I? Yeah. So this shows a couple of soils that were on the land surface during these interglacial periods. So between these ice advances, there are periods of time like now. We're in an interglacial right now, when the soil was exposed to the atmosphere. There was soil formation processes going on, and they got buried. This one was there for 2 interglacials, the Yarmouth and the Sangamon, as well as the Illinois glacial that happened in between those 2 interglacials. But when the Illinoisan moved into Iowa, just a little ways into eastern Iowa, the rest of the state, wasn't the state at the time, but the rest of the land was probably under permafrost. And so there was a lot of periglacial processes happening. And then on the right is the Farmdale, and you can see what happens when there's permafrost. This is buried soil, but it's got this cryogenic deformation from the permafrost, and you see all kinds of that up in Alaska. So I need to cover just a little bit about the Quaternary stratigraphy of Iowa. And let's see here. Yeah. So I'm only showing the upper 4. I said there were probably at least 10 glacial advances. This shows just the upper 4. And then here they're called the A-tills here. On the right was work done by George Hallberg when he was state geologist here in 1980 or in the 80s. I don't have time to really talk about how these relate to one another, but I want to talk about these paleosols. All these squiggly lines here, every single one of these tills has a paleosol capping it. That's what the squiggly lines are. These are paleosols. And so in the late 80s, early 90s, when I did my PhD here, I looked at one of these paleosols in Madison County, and this is one of the profiles that I examined, and it's very thick. I mean, modern day soils might be 80 inches, 5 or 6 feet. This paleosol is anywhere from 3 to 7 meters thick, and so it's very homogeneous, very fine grained. No observable horizons. So it kind of baffled the geologists for a long time. So what I did is I did a comprehensive analysis, study of this paleosol. And I just want to focus on the micromorphology because that had never been done before. Again, looking at it under thin sections. And a thin section is basically you take a plot of soil undisturbed, you send it to a lab, or maybe you do it here. You can infuse it with a resin, then you cut it with a rock saw, and you place it on a slide and then abrade it until it's like a third of the thickness of a sheet of paper. So it's real thin, but you're seeing a vertical section of that soil as though it's, it's like what it looks like underground. And from that, the micromorphology was very illuminating, and the particle size distribution and other things. I was able to propose a sequence of environmental conditions, both forest, prairie, paraglacial conditions, arid, semi-arid, so all kinds of different conditions. I don't really want to go into this, but this is what you can learn from paleosols. And so I want to talk about instead, when I came back to Iowa in 2000, I did a lot of work on soil erosion and sedimentation, but we were doing drilling. We had our own drill rig with NRCS, and I know you were out there, Steph. I'm not sure if Phil was in Adams County. But anyway, we were doing the soil scientists were doing a mapping update of soils map for Adams County, and they had questions about the paramaterials. So we went and we drilled, and I took advantage of it to do a little bit of paleosol study because I sort of had that paleosol fun, you know. And we drilled here at Stringtown, and 7 meters. There's a yarn saying with paleosol there is 7 meters thick. There's nothing. I mean, there used to be a town. It got its name because it was a processing center for hemp for during World War II, for canvas, uniforms, that kind of thing, ropes. And so we drilled. We figured out what was there. Did a little bit of study on that. But I want to talk about what we found here at the other 2 transects, the Quincy and the Tanner. Because what I really wanted to look at were these older paleosols. Here's that Yarmouth Sangamon about the land surface for 350,000, maybe 400,000 years. This upper one here, this sitting on top of the A2 till, developed in the A2 till, is under 600,000 years old. So I was really curious about these. And so also the soil scientist that mapped this, he had found 65 exposures in the county where these older paleosols were exposed on steep slopes or road cuts, that kind of thing. So we knew they were there and ready for the thinking. Pre-Illinois paleosol 1, it's a mouthful, so I'm just going to call them undignified name, but pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, because it's a lot easier to say. So here's one of these exposures where we've got a pre-Illinois paleosol. We know it's pre-Illinois because it's covered by till, and we're in a part of Iowa where that's the only kind of till that's there. The Des Moines lobe did not make it that far south, so we know we've got pre-Illinois till, and so it's a pre-Illinois paleosol. It's silty clay, something like 55% clay. Till might have 25 or 30% clay. That's a huge difference in clay, and clay has a tremendous effect on soil behavior. So here's the Quincy transect. We drilled these 3 holes up and down the slope here. And we encountered a YSP, the Yarmouth Sangamon, but it was truncated. The upper part was removed by erosion. But we do have pit 1, both places, and we actually got down deep enough to see the paleosol sitting on top of the A2 till. I'm going to focus in on this right now. So this one's interesting because it's got till below it, till above it, but in between it's got these lacustrine. I'm interpreting them as lacustrine sediments. It's very silty, some kind of water lake sediments. Anyway, so there's a meter or half a meter of that, so it protected that paleosol from the ice. It was not eroded. So it's got a beautiful A horizon there, preserved A horizon, right at the top of that paleosol. Now, that's a picture of what it looks like in the hand sample, but if you look at it under thin section in the microscope, I was pretty excited when I found this because it's got these granular structures, these granular heads or aggregates, which is very typical in neighborhoods and even in modern day soil. And what these are they're the pellets, the fecal pellets of earthworms and other fauna. When the soil passes through the gut, the clay in it gets smeared around these heads. And you can see it both in plain light and in circularly polarized light. I know a lot of you probably work with cross-polarized. Circularly polarized light comes in really handy with soil because it highlights these circular features. These orange circles are this oriented clay that have high birefringence. And so that was pretty amazing. I was pretty excited about that. And another thing that I thought was interesting, that I had also found in the Yarmouth-Sangamon paleosol is this pedogenic barite. Pedogenic means it was formed during soil formation. It's not part of the parent material. And these are crystals, really nice, let me get a word, beautifully formed, word for it. Euhedral. Pathogenic? No. Euhedral? Euhedral crystals, right, thank you. This picture is actually from the Yarmouth-Sangamon in Madison County because the USDA didn't have a scanning electron microscope, so I just used this one. But yeah, so these barite nodules are formed in the lower part of this paleosol. And barite is not common in modern soils, but where it's found in woodland soils, forest soils. So this probably indicates that there's the early part of this, as this builds up, this paleosol, it had forest vegetation. So let's look quickly at the one over on the right here now, where we got down into the older paleosol. Again, this is varied by something other than the glacial till. So it protected the paleosol from erosion by the ice sheet. And again, we've got a preserved age horizon. So this sucker is like 700,000 years old, and it had two massive ice sheets overriding it. And yet, the age horizon soil structure is there. I challenge you to go out into a cornfield and find. I mean, it's just amazing. There might have been thousands of feet of ice bearing or riding over this. So it is compacted, it's fused, but you can see it in these orange circles. That's what those are. The circular granular heads. Remember I said soils are ecosystems. Well, this blob here of black soil came from up here. So I'm sure you can figure out how I got down there. It's an animal burrow. You don't see the whole burrow because it goes in and out. But that soil is leached just like this soil. But the surrounding material is unleached. So it's clearly been transported deeper down. Okay. The Tanner transect, not a whole lot to say about it. One interesting thing is that we've got, again, two paleosols here, two paleosols here. Every single one of them is covered directly by glacial till. So there's no age horizons observed there. Age horizons are gone. One thing of interest, though, is this wedge structure in PIP 2, and totally different kind of structure than that granular structure that the earthworms and fauna create. Let's see. Okay, so remember, this has 55% clay. So what happens when you've got all this shearing pressure down on a high clay soil and it gets wet? It expands. It can't move up because it's got so much weight above it. The only thing it can do is move laterally. And that's why you get that kind of structure, and it's even more evident in what we call slicken sides. This is clay just smeared along that. I wouldn't call it a fracture because it's from linear extension, and the core just breaks along those slicken sides really smoothly. And again, the wedge structure, and then here under the microscope, again, like 1/3 of an inch across here, each of these, you see in microscale exactly what you see in macro scale. Oh, I forgot something I wanted to mention. I'm going to go back a couple of slides. So you notice the depth here, 71 centimeters, and then it goes down, to 145 centimeters. So there's like 75 centimeters to 3/4 of a meter of this age horizon. Pretty phenomenal. What is it, like 2.5 feet? You don't see that today. Okay. So. That's a trip back in time, and now we're gonna move back up to the present day. Because I wanna take a look now at modern soils, I wanna talk about racial change. When I came back to Iowa. I'm not so good at this. Yeah, the last thing, you know, I think as geoscientists, we have a better understanding of how time works. It creates, destroys, transforms, etc. So what natural rates of change are versus anthropogenic rates today, and things like you know, things that are just off the charts, you know, soil erosion, CO2 buildup, sea level rise, loss of biodiversity. All those rates are just way faster than anything in geologic history, except for one maybe an asteroid here. So we're going to jump forward in time, and when I came back to Iowa from the Southwest, I evaluated soil erosion, and then I later promoted soil health, and that's what I saw here for 18 years in Iowa, is what inspired me to write my book. So the parent materials in Iowa have remained constant for the last 10,000 years or more. Plant and animal communities slowly migrated back and forth due to climatic changes. And we've had a shifting prairie woodland mosaic up until the settlers arrived anyway, for the last 4,000 years or so. But natural rates were slow. It took, for instance, 3,000 years for a prairie to move from the western part of Iowa to the east. 3,000 years, pretty slow compared to the 100 years it took to destroy the prairie. But agriculture. Then the settlers arrived in the early 1800s. And 1830, John Deere plow became available. John Deere plow up there, and then you know the difference in we're looking at 125 years or whatever, just tremendous in terms of equipment. So a lot of change happened overnight. So now, when it used to depend on vegetation and climate, now the thickness and fertility of soil depends almost completely on human decision making, land use. So this map shows the erosion rates in 2017. National Resources Inventory, NRCS puts it out every 5 years. The data was collected by 2017. It didn't actually come out until 2020 because there's a whole lot of processing of the data. This is a nationwide, thousands of people involved in the data collection. And then the 2022 data is finally done, collected, and that should come out probably next year. The pandemic can set things back, of course. So you can see here, we're sort of a bullseye in the country. You know, some other surrounding states have some too, but particularly in western and much of eastern Iowa, southern Iowa, erosion this is sheet and rill erosion. It doesn't include gully erosion or channel erosion. It's just sheet and rills. Well, it's pretty much washing right off the slope. Our average in 2017, 5.8 tons per acre per year. A study was done to estimate what it was back in the 1930s, and at that point, the average would have been 15 tons per acre per year. Now that's an average. So there's, you know, good parts of the state, like the Des Moines Road, where that is much lower. It might only be 1 or 2 tons. So in order to get to 5.8, some of these are 9, 10, even more tons per acre each year. Yeah. Oh, and it's telling that Iowa has 7% of the country's cropland, but we produce 15% of the country's soil loss. This just shows the grouping of Iowa soils in 6 different groups called orders, but I just going to focus on the molly soils here, the grassland soils, because at one time, prairie soils made up 75 or 80% of the state, and now they're down to 60%. And you wonder why. I mean, I said that soil has memory, it remembers the past. but not if you erode off the topsoil. Here's an example. On the left, you've got a nice mollisol, the beautiful A horizon, little under prairie. I mean, it's existing today. You can see it's under corn. This hasn't been significantly eroded. On the right, in western Iowa, this is under corn. So in the hillier parts of the state, this used to look like this. Well, the A horizon is gone, and now there's just maybe 2 or 3 inches of corn topsoil for A horizon. And really, to appreciate what actually happened here, it should look more like this. This is gone, 2 feet. And now it's trying to develop a little bit of topsoil on top of this new material. So it's a much, much younger soil now. It's an endosol, it's a baby soil. It's starting all over again from scratch. This is what's happened to our mollisol. So let's look at rates. You know, geologists, I think you read a lot of different numbers, but one number I've read is they come up with sort of an average rate of geological erosion over Earth history of 0.1 millimeter per year, or which is like an inch every 250 years. And that's what agronomists say that we need to limit erosion to 1 inch in 250 years to keep sustainability, keep our soil sustainable. In the 1930s, that number in Iowa was 20 times higher than that, 20 times was sustainable. And in 2017, it was still 7 times higher, despite a lot of conservation practices on the land. And that, remember, is the average. It's the average. So it's still in places in Iowa, it can be 20, 30 times of the rate of what's actually sustainable. Costs of soil erosion are many. The soil becomes degraded, you know, it doesn't hold as much. The topsoil holds a lot of water compared to the subsoil. It doesn't hold as much water. We've lost organic matter. Carbon is going up into the atmosphere because every time you erode a layer of soil, you're exposing that carbon that's underneath it to the atmosphere. So there's continually carbon being lost in the atmosphere. Of course, lost productivity. That's the farmer's concern. Sediment loading, this is Lake Red Rock, and estimates are it's lost 50% of its water storage since it was built, and I don't know when it was built, but estimates are that it fills there's enough sediment coming into Lake Red Rock to fill 7 Olympic-sized swimming pools every day. It's just unfathomable. Yeah, every day. I mean, it's a big watershed, but still, it's mostly an agricultural watershed. That's what it's happening. And because you're losing your topsoil, you've got to put fertilizer on. Most of our fields today, if they didn't put fertilizer down, they would have nothing. Their yields would be incredibly low. And so all that fertilizer, and a lot of it ends up in our streams, and we've got a big problem in Iowa with nitrates and phosphorus in streams. As far as I'm concerned, the 2 most important features of soil are that internal structure of the soil and its ecology. So I want to just talk briefly about each of those. This might remind you of that granular structure you saw in the paleosol, except here it is not compacted. So all this white space is space. It's open pore space where water can percolate down through the soil. This is under no-till and cover crop. This is under rotational grazing, because overgrazing in the same plot over and over, it compacts the soil, just like tillage does. Here's conventional tillage. I had to actually use a different microscope setting because if I left it, you couldn't see the pores at all. Pores are white. All that white stuff, that's just large silt grains. The pores are these little blue spots, and how is water supposed to get down through that? There are no vertical pores at all. And even under continuous grazing, you can see a crack here. That is when soil is compacted, and when it's wet and then it dries out, it springs back and you get these horizontal cracks. So water can't percolate down through horizontal cracks. It's got to have vertical pores. This is a nice slide that one of our soil scientists took, showing no-till on the left, conventional tillage on the right, exact same soil type after a rain. On the left, you don't see any standing water. The water is all on down into the soil. On the right, it's all in the row between rows, and then it pours, it drains off into this little ditch or channel, and then it goes into the river. So it's carrying, pesticides, nitrates, all that fertilizer, whatever. So this is the difference between, because tillage really destroys that soil structure. Soil structure that has been in that one soil for 700,000 years, and in the matter of a few decades, it's been destroyed in our topsoil from the surface. So there's compaction, there's crusting, standing, because it's crusted, standing water, when you drive, like especially on a Des Moines road, they may not have as much erosion, but you see a lot of water pounding. And it's not because that's the water table, it's because the water can't get in, it just sits there. And eventually it gets in, but the upper part is going to be saturated anaerobic, that kills the microbes. And then because of poor infiltration, the big problem in Iowa is runoff. We have huge numbers of amounts of runoff. Some of the consequences, I worked on this site in Eastern Lake watershed, southeast part of Des Moines. 7-foot head cut in the drainage heading up towards, it was only about 100 feet above County Road. So something had to be done. It was going to take out the County Road. Big problem, we have these ponds all over the state, but they're filled with silt, near bridges, all kinds of discharge in streams, and the streams are simply not equipped to handle. They didn't form with those kind of discharges in mind. And then federal gully erosions are a big problem in the state, on the Des Moines lobe as well as everywhere else. Some of you might have been on this field trip that Art Dennis led us on in western Iowa. This is a gully in Mills County. They had put they were channeling the ditch drainage through a culvert. So here's the culvert, and here's the ground. So it just had a vertical drop, all the water's just dropping down off that culvert. And this formed in less like 2 years. Incredible rate of erosion. Okay, how are we doing on time? Okay, I think I know this. So unlike the paleosol, soils at the surface, they're not passive or latent, they are living, they're a living ecosystem, they're teeming with all kinds of critters if they're healthy soils. Now, in a lot of our cornfields, really the only life in a lot of those is bacteria. There's not much else. Bacteria. But it's the fungi, it's the microbes, the protozoa, soil insects and earthworms that keep the system running. I'm not sure where this came from, it's kind of goofy, but it shows how the underground biota or biomass is so much greater than the above ground. You might have 4 sheep sitting above here, and some grass, whatever. But you've got 33 sheep's worth of biota, like biomass rather, between the fungi, bacteria, et cetera, et cetera. And those fungi are incredibly important. These fungal hyphae, they're called, it's the individual segments of these strands. They can go out 1 or 2 yards away from, I'm sorry, I keep going back from English. NRCS always uses the English scale, feet, inches, etc. And science uses the metric. Anyway, these can extend out a long ways from the root, and they're able to bring in nutrients from a much larger area than that root alone could manage. The problem is they're very fragile. You can imagine what happens when you go through there with a flower and disc. They're just destroyed. They're broken into little tiny bits. And so this, you might have seen something like this is a compost pile. That when you have a bunch of these massed together, they're actually white. They can see them in your garden. So the fungi, super important. I got a few videos just to kind of spruce things up. So this is a protozoan. You can see its little flagella. Maybe you can see it, I don't know, from that distance. That's what propels it through the soil water. And then another kind of protozoan, this is a flagellate, like that guy moves a whole lot faster than the other one. The other one's pretty lazy. In a native natural soil that hasn't been fertilized, it's got a nice topsoil, it's a good ecosystem. 80% of the nitrogen that a plant needs comes from these guys. Because what they do, they have to eat a lot of bacteria to get enough carbon. But when they eat, to get enough carbon, they end up with too much nitrogen. Because the bacteria has a different nitrogen to carbon ratio. And so they shed off that nitrogen and that becomes available to plants. So, I mean, nature just worked out a beautiful system. And we've just been circumventing it for a long time. Nematodes, they come in three kinds. They either eat bacteria or, I can't remember the other, but anyway, some of them eat roots, and those are the ones that the farmers don't like, of course. But if you have a healthy ecosystem, they stay in balance, and you don't get the root-eating nematodes out of control. And we have a way of taking care of these root-eating nematodes. This is a fungal strand here. Hypha is one little bit of it. So it's got, it encircles this nematode and fills with water and actually strangles it. I think that's pretty amazing photo. I'm going to book called Teeming with Microbes. The rotifers I find really interesting because they're kind of lazy too, but they can withstand several years of desiccation. So in droughts, these guys can stay alive because what they do is they shrink up and they retract into themselves, and their metabolism really slows down, so they can survive for a long period of time. And then there's the earthworms. They're shredders. They shred the organic matter in order to get to the bacteria, and then the rest of it comes out the other end of the worm as castings. So see the worm castings. Now look at this photo of that paleosol. That's exactly what those are. Worm castings. And that one paleosol had 2.5 feet of that. So pretty interesting. I think earthworms are absolutely amazing. A fellow soil scientist did a study, and he took 2 no-till fields where they were not tilling the soil, and then one that was conventionally tilled, right adjacent, same soil type, counted the worms. He put out a tarp, quickly dug a cubic meter of soil. I'm sorry, a cubic foot. Let me get there. Cubic foot, which is about 7.5 gallons. And then he quickly counted the worms. Well, you can see the worm counts 22, 29. The cultivated one, like 1 or 2 worms. So the no-till sites had 15 to 20 times more worms. 95% of the worms are lost to cultivation. And they are the ones largely responsible for the soil structure in the topsoil. Organic matter is what feeds the soil organisms. Organic matter is made up of large organic molecules that nutrients are kind of caught up in there and they're not available to plants. But these protozoa and other microbes, they take that and convert those nutrients into usable forms like carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. So they are really instrumental. Unless you put in a lot of fertilizer in the soil, you need these guys. They improve the stability of the soil pads, soak up a lot of water, and of course, it sequesters carbon in the soil. Soil organic matter is 60% carbon. If you don't have any soil organic matter, you're not sequestering the carbon in your soil. Where is it gone? Obviously erosion. I like this lower one. Judy, I think you and I were on this trip. I took this photo. This is out of Durango a couple years ago. This is wind erosion in the winter when there's no snow cover. That is humus. Humus is over 1,000 years old. It's the most valuable, most precious part of the soil organic matter. It ends up in the snowbanks, in the ditches where, nothing's going to grow. I mean, they're not going to plant crops there. So intensive tillage, oxidizing the organic carbon. And we're also having more oxidation of carbon due to climate change, warmer, drier climate. Fields left bare for 7 months out of the year, at least 6 and 7 years, 7 months. And depleted organic matter means you have to apply more fertilizer. And that's what's happening today. Fields have no no organic matter, so they're just putting on nitrogen and hydrous ammonia. And hydrous ammonia kills the microbes. I think the only thing that survives are bacteria. And then you've got all this runoff delivering it to the streams. I don't know about Iowa City, how they get their drinking water, but I know in Des Moines, they have the largest nitrate removal facility in the world. And that's because of all of these watersheds delivering nitrates in the Des Moines River and Rocky River. And I'm sure that's the case in other parts of the state and parts of the Midwest. Climate change is already a factor. As you know, Eastern Iowa is going through a pretty severe drought right now. Most of Eastern Iowa is either in, extreme or what's the next level up? Extreme or exceptional drought. Like Lynn, Benton County, exceptional drought. It's the highest level of drought this year, this summer. We've had derechos that knocked all the corn crops over. Got water standing in the fields in the spring. They can't get the crops planted, so who bails them out? Federal government. Your taxes. Weather events are becoming more extreme. We're not getting as much rain, but when we get it, it comes in deluges. So we all need healthy soils, not just the farmers. We all need healthy soils, sequester carbon, etc. And oh yeah, I wanted to mention this fertilizer. Anhydrous ammonia this last summer was more than double its normal price. In the spring, it was as much as 3 times what they had to pay last year. So if there's any incentive for farmers to start doing it differently, man, I would think that would be it. And the water quality of our streams really depends on healthy soils. No matter what, it's a harbinger one way or the other. It's either going to continue to degrade, our food, and we're not going to have healthy and affordable food or healthy ecosystems. And this reliance on agrochemicals, it's got to stop. I mean, there's just no end in sight. And if it keeps going the way it is, then we're not going to have any pollinators left. Human health. I just heard a thing on NPR, you guys, about male fertility. Sperm counts are being severely, they've gone down from like 160 parts per million or whatever, sperm per million to like 40,000. I mean, like a quarter what they used to be. That's one example of how pesticides and pollutants in the environment are affecting human health. Okay, so I'm gonna quit. It's gonna be that. I was gonna do this. There are a lot of different farmers. It's really, it can really be encouraged when you talk to these people. I talked to many of these some of the farmers I work with, but there are literally thousands of farmers that are changing their ways. It's not enough, a third of the land is under no-till, and it's only like 5 or 6% doing cover crops, and it's not the big producers. So people that have 10,000 acres need to get on board. So these are things I talk about with farmers about how to promote soil health. Okay. I'm going to stop there. University presses are kind of in trouble. They don't get much funding. So I've got my book is on the left, and the book on the right was edited by Cornelia or Kathleen Woida, and she wrote Fragile Giants and other books about natural history. I've got a chapter in there. So I do have some of these books here with me that I'm selling for $15 a piece just to support. I hardly did anything, so it's not me. It's the support of the press. Okay, I'm done. All right, where are you out?
Oh, that was a really fascinating talk, Kathy. I'm curious about the barite in the soils because if I remember right, you said it was a character. They're typically found in woodland soils.
Yeah, where they're found. They're not very common.
So what's the barite source and why is it precipitating? On your SEM slide or picture, it looked like that was the only thing precipitating in that layer.
Well, that was actually inside the nodule. And I think the barium is coming from the feldspars.
Okay.
And the sulfur, different sources. of
Okay, so
sulfur.
it's a substrate
Very
that it's
sulfur.
developing.
Yeah, Yeah.
Why is it only in forested areas?
I'm not sure, that's where they're finding them. Like, there's only a handful of cases where it's been found in modern soils. And yet, I've looked at 3 different yarrow salmon aerosols in every single one of them. And it's in that other, Illinois aerosol. Well, it's kind of interesting, not present today. And the thing is, when they may be more there on the one that we know, because we see them, they look just like calcium carbonate.
Okay, yeah.
But they don't fizz. So then you'll get them a little further.
There'll also be a lot more dense.
And I did do X-ray diffraction too, definitely.
One thing I noticed with those barite nodules, Tom, they form in pedicels that form in till rather than lush, like most of the modern soils. So the geochemistry of those tills would have more exotic minerals than the lush,
Yeah, a lot
which
more
are just
feldspar.
quartz. Yeah. So
That's true, yeah. The less, so much towards. Yeah, I think these were the lower part of the paleosol.
yeah, I usually see them like a meter down.
Yeah, okay.
So I feel like an educated person who feels a call to action, right? But I don't know what that action should be.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, well, that's why Connie edited her book, Tending Iowa's Land. Of course, that's just Iowa. We're not the center of the universe, I realize. But, yeah, there's like 14 different authors in there, talking about different, soil, water, land, climate change, biodiversity. And so, we're going around giving talks around the state. There's a lot that farmers can do, a lot. And one thing is, the interesting thing is a lot of, I think there's 20 or 25 states in the union have passed soil health bills. Iowa's not one of them.
So maybe we could write to our legislature.
Absolutely, yeah. There were 2 or 3 different bills on the docket, but they got hung up in committee, and I think they're dead in the water. In their legislature.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
But-
Thank you.
Vote, I guess, right? Anybody else? Thank you so much all for coming, yeah.
So what was the typical A horizon thickness in Tamus soils before the European,
Probably on the order of 24 inches. Feet.
and what is it now on the average?
Well, it has to be 9 inches to be called a mollusol,
Okay,
so it couldn't be a tame unless it was at least 9 inches. But I know we took a sample for the thin sections out of pasture in on the Des Moines Road, I think it was Hamilton County, where rotational grazing had never been cultivated in. There were 24 inches. 24 inches of black topsoil. I was really impressed. Beautiful structure. Yeah, I mean, they have a little cheese farm. And they're rotating their cattle every day. I mean, it's amazing. It's a lot, it can take a lot of work, but some of it's very doable. And a lot of farmers who have done cover crops, for instance, they find they have better yields. I can guarantee you they're making better profits this year because they didn't have to pay for that expensive anhydrous. But even though their yields were a little lower, for the first few years they can be a little lower, but after that they take off. I know that profits are better, bottom line. But farmers like to get together in the coffee shop in the morning and talk about the yields. They want so many bushels per acre. They don't talk about what the bottom line was. You put a lot of money into fertilizer. It's challenging.
All right.
Got time for one more? What do you see as the impacts of drainage tiling on soil health?
Impact of
Drainage tiling,
trade flow. That's a good question. I mean, it isn't so much the drainage itself, it's just that you're opening it up to agriculture. It's the tillage that's going to cause the damage. And the drainage, the tiling can certainly increase your discharge to streams. Because it's going into the tile directly into
You see a lot of oxidation happen where the tiles have gone through, so you got more oxidation up right above the tile and oxidizes some of the organic matter. So you see a lot of yield impacts of tiles, and some of it,
Yeah.
it's less about water and more about making organic carbon more available.
It's a possibility, I hadn't really thought about it. So, thanks, I did want to mention. Lee said I was the state geologist, was not. Bill, or Keith is the state geologist, I was the state geologist for NFCS. Not state. Sorry. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Your time.
Bye, everybody.
Right off the left. Yeah, it's pretty little.